call it Spygate. You're calling it Spygate. A lot of bad things have happened. I want them all to get together. They'll sit in a room. Hopefully they'll be able to work it out among themselves. We're not undercutting. We're cleaning everything up. What I want is total transparency.
Any meeting between the Justice Department and Capitol Hill about such information should only be attended by members of the Gang of Eight.
I don't care who comes. I'm not in control of the invite list.
Well, this meeting is going forward. We mentioned it earlier with John Roberts. The meeting tomorrow will include the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, the House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy, the FBI Director, the National Intelligence Director, and the Acting Principal Deputy Attorney General. All of those will be at this meeting at the DOJ about the classified elements of this investigation. But we're being told that there will likely be another meeting with the Gang of Eight, the bipartisan leadership of Congress, possibly after the Memorial Day recess. We'll start there with all this investigation of the investigation and bring in the panel. Joining me here in Los Angeles, Steve Hilton, former advisor to British Prime Minister David Cameron and host of The Next Revolution here on Fox News, and Leslie Marshall, syndicated talk radio host, and in Washington, Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Matthew Continetti, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon. Steve, let me start with you. Your thoughts on how this is all coming out and the significance of it.
Well, Brett, it wasn't that long ago that the left and parts of the establishment media, I'm thinking in particular the New York Times, were deeply suspicious of what we now describe as the deep state. When we had James Clapper going to Congress and lying about surveilling the American people, there's this suspicion of the security services and the intelligence agencies. And now that they seem to be against Trump, we're supposed to believe that they're purer than pure, everything that they say is gospel, and there's no grounds for any suspicion. I think there's no question that there are sufficient reasons to think that the establishment in the government bureaucracy thought that the prospect of a Trump presidency was unthinkable, unacceptable, and took steps to try and stop it. There's enough suspicion there to think that we really do need a thorough investigation that's equivalent to the investigation in Russia meddling, which is really important, to look at the potential of deep state meddling.
Mara, I don't know. Are you calling it Spygate? Who's calling it Spygate?
I'm not, but the president is very happy, it sounds, that he's branded something new. He is a super brander, and he's come up with Spygate, and as he said today, you're calling it Spygate, I'm calling it Spygate, everyone's talking about this. He said it could be the biggest scandal in American history. What he's talking about, according to his tweets, is that there was someone, a spy, as he calls it, embedded in his campaign for political purposes to spy on the campaign. So far, there's no evidence of that. We don't know if he's talking about an FBI informant who met with certain members of the campaign, reached out to them to find out what contacts they had with Russians. But if the president wanted to, he can declassify any piece of information he wants. He could have asked any of his intelligence officials over the last couple of weeks or months to say, hey, tell me what you know. Was there a spy embedded in my campaign? I don't think he wants to know. I think he wants to keep this story going. This is a good narrative for him, and it helps him undermine the credibility of the investigations into him and his campaign.
Yeah, I want to talk about another development, Leslie, and that is the Jared Kushner getting security clearance today, finally, after a long period of time. A national security law attorney, former FBI agent, told us, quote, this is a very significant development. The Bureau would have had very senior people on this, and the matter would have been reviewed and approved at the most senior levels. Given all the circumstances, this decision would be highly vetted and considered. They wouldn't be deeming him eligible for access to classified materials, no matter what level of the clearance, if there were any outstanding counterintelligence concerns whatsoever. Again, a very significant development. One person's assessment of this. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think that Jared Kushner is the problem. I think the president and his rhetoric are the problem. And I think that's caused a problem not only for his son-in-law, but the tensions that we have seen with the rhetoric toward the FBI and other law enforcement agencies that are supposed to be working for our country and for the Constitution and have their loyalty there. When we go back to Mara's point, you know, when you call this Spygate, and I know I'm not calling it Spygate, okay? I just want to go on the record there.
And I don't don't think we've called it Spygate. I'm pretty sure.
I'll bet you in a couple of weeks you will.
No,
That's
but
the way it goes.
let's just speak about Spygate, if we will. The role of the FBI and anybody, even if they've worked for a Republican president, if it is this gentleman all the way back to Ronald Reagan, is to do exactly this, is to say, hey, wait a minute, there have been some conversations between Russia and those in the United States. Paul Manafort has been indicted. Paul Manafort is one of the people that was spoken to. And to Mara's point, the president certainly has the power to find out if there was a spy embedded, if there truly was Spygate. This is deflection. Why deflect from the Mueller special counsel investigation if there's nothing to hide, if there's no there?
Both things are going forward, and we always say we don't know what we don't know, but we're covering both sides. The reason I bring up the Jared Kushner thing is how that was covered early on in this process suggested that because of all his foreign contacts and all of this, the questions that were raised about Jared Kushner, that there was no way he was going to get security clearance and somehow he could be charged or indicted. That was the coverage and the speculation. Now he's cleared.
Right, and as one former official told Catherine Herridge in her report, Brett, that would imply that those counterintelligence concerns no longer exist if he has been granted this security coverage. I like to quote Donald Rumsfeld. There are so many known unknowns about now the investigation into Russian interference and also the investigation of the investigation, which is really, let's remember, coming from Congress. As much as Donald Trump is publicizing it and, in fact, aiding it, there are a lot of concerns from the House Intelligence Committee about how did this start. And I think that's one of the great known unknowns, rather, is when did this investigation open? What was in the original order that Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein gave to Robert Mueller? We still don't know the full details of that. We also don't know about this other British or semi-British professor, Mifsud, who met with George Papadopoulos. He hasn't been seen in public in months. So the known unknowns continue to mount.
Mara, where do you think this goes, and how fast do you think it comes to resolution?
I really don't know. We know what Rudy Giuliani says about it, that he'll be done by September. Mueller will be done by September. The problem with covering this is that every little twist and turn, we don't know the big picture. Bob Mueller isn't talking, to his credit. So we're covering this through a straw, and everything seems like the biggest deal. I just would say the bottom line to me for today for Jared Kushner, this was a good day for Jared Kushner, and it was a good week for Jared Kushner because he started working on a substantive policy that has bipartisan support in Congress, and that's prison reform.
That's exactly right. And we'll be following that as it makes its way. It's already passed the House and now headed to the Senate.
I take diplomatic security very serious. Never make an accusation.
I happen to agree with you. Oh, now the real secretary is coming out.
If I could just explain. Okay, we're going to give you time, but we want to give the secretary a chance to respond.
We had
he didn't do that with Secretary.
Killed in
He did not do that with Secretary Clinton. Let me tell you that.
Well, that was one of the heated moments in the testimony today, talking there about the Benghazi hearing and the new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. He also talked about Russian interference and the possibility ahead of the midterms.
We have not been able to achieve deterrence, effective deterrence of some of these efforts of the Russians. But this administration has taken enormous efforts to push back against Russia that haven't been done in an awfully long time. No responsible government official would ever state that they believe they've done enough to forestall any attack on the United States of America.
We're back with the panel. Mara, Secretary Pompeo has a full plate here with all of the foreign policy challenges he's facing. Your thoughts on the hearing today?
Yeah, I thought that he was pretty skillful. He's a politician. He's been elected. He's gone before voters. The difference between him and Rex Tillerson is vast. And you can just see he's so much more at ease in these situations. He's got a lot on his plate, as you said. He's got North Korea. He's got Iran. He's got State Department morale, which is pretty low. But he's working hard to improve that. And what he just said about the government needs to do more to harden its election and ballot infrastructure against possible Russian threats for the November elections is important. And we'll see how they follow that up.
Steve, the real question is about North Korea and whether this summit moves forward June 12th. What's your sense as you look at the tea leaves here?
It feels as if it's going to go ahead. It feels like there's a lot of dancing going on. Both sides trying to make it clear that they're not being played by the other. I think that's what you'd expect. But remember, it's an extraordinary situation that we're in, that we're even talking about this happening. That itself is progress. And I think the most important thing to bear in mind is that all of this is better than the alternative, than where we were a few months ago, a couple of years ago, when there was such a frightening prospect of a nuclear attack from North Korea. The fact that we're even in a conversation is good, and that's still true even if they have the summit and not much comes out of it other than they agree to keep talking.
Matthew, when we get to Iran and the issue of pulling out of the nuclear agreement, now you have the Ayatollah coming forward with stipulations for the EU to stay in the nuclear deal. Among them, leave our ballistic missiles alone.
This comes as the New York Times is reporting, Brett, that there is evidence now of Iranian missile testing in kind of the rural areas of Iran. And again, a clear violation of the spirit of the agreement which the United States pulled out of. I think the mullah's attempt to intimidate the Europeans is probably going to backfire, and it's also misplaced. The real decision making that needs to take place now is in Washington, D.C., and that is to, are we going to really levy the full secondary sanctions against European companies that do continue to do business with Iran as a result of the sanctions? Another decision that Secretary Pompeo, and also I'd add, I thought it was interesting in the photo of the meeting with President Moon of South Korea that right next to Secretary Pompeo was National Security Advisor John Bolton, who clearly, I think, is having a very expansive role in all of these internal debates.
Leslie, I saw you shaking your head about the North Korea summit. Here's the president the other day when asked about whether it's going forward or not.
June 12th, are you going to be in Singapore?
We'll see what happens. I mean, right now we're looking at it. We're talking about it. They're talking to us. We have certain conditions. We'll see what happens. But there's a good chance. I know it would be a great thing for North Korea. If that happens, it'll be a great thing for North Korea. Most importantly, it would be a great thing for the world. So we'll see what happens.
Right.
That's with Brian Kilmeade today. That interview airing tomorrow morning on Fox and Friends. He sounded less enthusiastic about the prospects earlier in the week, but seems to say that there's still a chance.
There is a chance. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, on June 12th, I just don't. And I think the fact that, you know, you see this coin and all of a sudden the tough talk with China, that changes, and China definitely is a part of this.
You mean the coin that they minted for the summit itself?
Yes. When we look historically at this country and this family and this leader, his father and his grandfather, we've been here before, Brett. We have had promises, we've had meetings, we've had promises of meetings. And at the end of the day, nothing ends up materializing. And I think it's interesting that we have a president that's a Republican and a Republican Party who poo-pooed Democrats like Barack Obama and Bill Clinton with regard to diplomacy or sanctions with North Korea. And they're doing the same thing that, quite frankly, both Democrats and Republicans have done for the past 50 years.
You've never had the pressure, the concerted pressure from the US and China that's been applied on North Korea that's actually got them to the point of even considering meeting. That is the new development.
I agree with you there. And this is something that's not left or right. I mean, you know, I'm not a fan of the president. I didn't vote for him. But, you know, we want world peace. We want to denuclearize North Korea. Will these talks happen? And if they happen, will it lead to that? I'm not sure. This is not a man that can be trusted. I'm not talking about the president. I'm talking about Kim Jong-un.
Mara.
Yeah, I think that the president and maybe Kim are both invested in having this meeting happen at some point. But there was a sense that the president was so eager for this that he wasn't willing to kind of go through all the prep that was necessary, really find out what North Korea meant by denuclearization. It sounds like they mean something different than what the president means. And we don't know what concessions the president wants North Korea to make before they get investment from the U.S., the kinds of things that he's been saying will make North Korea very happy and very rich.
We will see. We'll follow all elements of it. Panel, thank you from L.A. and D.C.